Good afternoon. My name is Regan Andersen, and this is my honors thesis project, Playing Games or Being Played, which is a study of the characteristics of in-game advertising found in mobile children's games. I will be briefly discussing the history of advertising to children and the policies that are already in place to give you a base to work with. Afterwards, I will explain my methodology and the results of my research. And finally, I will discuss proposed policy to alleviate the issues with advertising to children in games. We will begin with the backstory to prepare you for gameplay. Children were first exposed to large amounts of advertising through radio shows and television. The Federal Trade Commission realized this was an issue and began to regulate what could be advertised to children. For example, Cisco advertised a wine spritzer that resulted in the hospitalization of consumers. This harmful advertising displayed the incorrect alcohol percentage, which led to overconsumption of the product. Advertisements like these open the eyes of regulators to the dangers of harmful advertising. The Federal Trade Commission now has specific segments that they try to protect children from. These include drinking, smoking and vaping, games and toys, and food advertising. All of these products, when advertised incorrectly, encourage harmful behavior or deceive children who do not understand that they are being advertised to, due to the lack of their schemer. As technology has developed, social media has played a large role in advertising as well. Through paid ads and AI tracking, advertising has become personalized. And with children having more access to tablets and iPhones than they previously did, they are exposed to even more advertisements than they were before. There are three major general policies. The first is the unfairness principle, which helps determine what is fair in advertisements. And unfortunately, it is the hardest policy to enforce due to the lack of requirements and its vagueness. The Central Hudson Standard is a measure on deceptive language and established that it is not protected by First Amendment rights to deceive those in marketing and advertising. This prevents marketers from creating advertisements that are deceptive to large and vulnerable consumer groups. Lastly, we have specific restrictions. For example, smoking advertisements are no longer allowed on television or on radio. Specific issues in mobile gaming are that there is a lack of regulation. So there is almost no consistent regulation across mobile games. Most companies fund their platform with advertising money and therefore end up advertising heavily to children playing those games. Secondly, deceptive advertising. Many CGI advertisements show a game in one way, and then when it is downloaded, it's completely different. And lastly, in-game purchases. Children can buy many in-game features these days and often do by mistake when games prompt them to. Additionally, the platform can prompt children to buy no ads for a nominal fee. Example would be Temple Run 2. Now I will give you some background about the games I played and how I conducted my research. In order to conduct my research, I created a system by which to organize and play the mobile games. I first identified the top 20 games in the App Store. After identifying these games, I conducted further research about each one. I recorded their creators, age, and the types of games that they fell into. Secondly, I played each game for 30 minutes and recorded gameplay to ensure I could rewatch and get the most accurate advertisement times. Thirdly, I rewatched every gameplay video to record the number, length, and type of advertisements present in each video. And lastly, I did a content analysis of the advertisements and identified what types of harmful characteristics each game contained. Here is the top 20 games of November 2021. You can see that 2 NFL games made the list when football season had just started. This wide array of games gave me a very different result than what I was expecting. A few quick statistics for you. 50% of the games did not contain any advertisements at all, which I did not predict, and I expected each one to have some type of advertisement. The average age of games was 5.6 years, And the lowest age of a game was 2 months, and the highest was Roblox at 15 years. Here is a graph outlining the types of games that I played. You can see that a majority of the games fall within the action and puzzle categories, which are commonly found in the top 20 games. And now for the high scores. 21% of total gameplay was advertising. 41% of gameplay was advertising when excluding the games without any advertising at all. In 20 games, there were a total of 148 advertisements, which was more than I was predicting. And lastly, out of 600 gameplay minutes, 123 of those were advertising. Below is a chart that shows the advertisement breakdown by game. One interesting finding was that both Madden NFL 22 and NFL Clash were just advertisements for the NFL. So the entire 30 minutes was actually gameplay and advertising at the same time. And secondly, Wordscapes has 61.7% of all the advertising that I found. But it's interesting because that's not necessarily for all children. So some of the advertisements in that particular game, children may be less exposed to than I found in this particular study. Here is a graph of all of the advertisement characteristics that I found. About 35% of the gameplay was harmful content. This included gambling, couples therapy, investments for Bitcoin, and also just for the stock market and insurance. About 23% was interactive advertisements, which allowed users to interact with the game before downloading it. However, sometimes the game looked completely different, and it also made it really difficult to navigate some of the ads. And lastly, about 28% was redirected to the App Store. So this promotes the buying of other games and downloads that lead to more advertising to children. And for our discussion, I would like to propose that the FTC finds a way to identify which games are for children and which games are for an audience that can discern between advertising and the game that they're playing. So when we look at the advertisements that I saw, some of the advertisements were for other games, and the games didn't even look the same as when I downloaded them in the App Store. So that's sort of like people weren't sure whether they're playing the game or whether they were actually playing an advertisement. After a system is in place to truly categorize mobile games, then the work can begin to create a new policy. This policy will ban deceptive advertising for children's games and require several things. Any advertising for children would need to be appropriate and not encourage consumer behavior or the download of other games. So this would basically take out a step, and parents would also have to help children download new games through the App Store only. And this is all the players. And the game is over. I would like to say a big thank you to the support that I've received to make this research possible as well. Jeff Langendorfer has been my advisor throughout this process and has been a great help in creating this presentation and project. Thank you guys so much.